Rain hammered the stone walls of Salisbury as a prisoner was led through the mud, his hands bound, his boots sinking into the cold sludge. Henry Stafford, the second Duke of Buckingham, once one of the most powerful men in England, could barely recognize the world around him. Just months earlier, he had stood beside a king. Now he marched toward the block of execution. He whispered to himself, almost in disbelief, "Richard, how did it come to this?" The story of his downfall did not begin in the reign or even with his rebellion but years earlier, in the shifting shadows of England's turbulent Wars of the Roses. Before we begin, if you love uncovering hidden, dramatic moments from history, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment with your thoughts. It really helps us bring you more stories like this one. Henry Stafford was born into privilege, yet also into danger. The Stafford family was one of the greatest houses in England. His bloodline connected him directly to royalty through both the Lancastrian and Yorkist lines. Noblemen whispered that Buckingham carried a claim to the throne, distant but real. But he was only a boy 5 years old when the crown took his father. The Stafford clan had supported the wrong side at the wrong time. His father was executed in the chaos of rebellion, and little Henry became Duke far too young. By the time he grew into adulthood, England had changed its king 3 times. Loyalties were currency, and Henry Stafford learned early that power didn't come from birth alone, it came from choosing the right side. In 1483, England was in another storm. King Edward IV was dead. His heir, the 12-year-old Edward V, was on his way to London. His uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, Edward IV's brother, was named protector. Buckingham watched all of this like a hawk. He was a nobleman of massive rank, but he had long felt overshadowed, ignored by King Edward IV, and pushed aside by the powerful Woodville family. When Richard of Gloucester moved decisively, seizing young King Edward V and reducing Woodville influence, Buckingham sensed a chance to rise. He pledged himself to Richard. It was a partnership that would shake England. Together they orchestrated a political revolution. They declared Edward V illegitimate. They removed the Woodvilles from power. And they secured Richard's path to the crown. In June 1483, Richard was crowned King. Richard III. Beside him at the coronation, dressed in jewels and velvet, stood Buckingham, the king's most trusted ally. And yet, in that very moment of triumph, seeds of betrayal already sprouted. The question of the princes in the Tower haunted the kingdom. Edward V and his younger brother Richard, once heirs to the throne, vanished into the inner chambers of the Tower of London. Rumors spread like wildfire that they had been murdered. Many whispered Richard III's name, but others whispered Buckingham's. Historians still debate the truth, but in 1483, what mattered was perception and fear. Buckingham could see public opinion turning dark and controlled. The crown he helped place on Richard's head now shook under the weight of suspicion. Buckingham himself began to rethink the men he had supported. He had expected rewards, land, influence. What he received was far less than he believed he deserved. Worse, Richard III was proving independent, stubborn, and unwilling to share true power. Buckingham's ambition, long buried under layers of polite obedience, began to burn. By late summer, Buckingham quietly withdrew from court. In his great castle in Brecon, in the Welsh Marches, he met secretly with envoys of a man living far away in exile, Henry Tudor. Henry Tudor was a claimant from the Lancastrian line, living in Brittany. He was an exile of England, but an exile with a following. Buckingham formed an audacious plan: raise rebellion against Richard, invite Henry Tudor to invade, replace Richard with Henry, and perhaps claim a share of the power for himself. Some whispered that Buckingham even dreamed of the throne. The rebellion was the boldest act of Buckingham's life. And it was doomed. October 1483. A rebellion erupted across southern England. Nobles who feared Richard's rule rose in arms. The plan was synchronized. Buckingham would bring a massive Welsh army east, while Henry Tudor crossed the Channel with Breton ships. But fate intervened. Rain fell, then fell harder, then unleashed a biblical flood. The rivers of Wales swelled into violent barriers. Roads became oceans of mud. Bridges collapsed. Fields vanished underwater. Historians note that it was one of the worst rainstorms in recorded medieval English history. Buckingham's army, trapped behind flooded rivers, Disintegrated, men deserted, supplies spoiled, morale collapsed, and then the news arrived: Richard's forces were coming for him. Buckingham fled on horseback, seeking shelter in the home of one of his own followers, Humphrey Bannister. But Bannister, fearing the king, betrayed him and reported his whereabouts. Richard's men stormed in. The Duke of Buckingham, once the most powerful noble in England, was dragged out of hiding and taken prisoner. The journey to Salisbury was brutal. Bound and muddy, Buckingham was paraded through angry towns, seen as both traitor and fallen noble. Richard III refused him a trial. Buckingham requested an audience with the king, a chance to explain, to negotiate, to beg. Richard refused. Their alliance was shattered beyond repair. In a letter, Richard wrote only one chilling line: "Let him be brought to Salisbury." There is no need to delay. On November 2, 1483, Buckingham was brought into the courtyard where his execution block waited. The rain poured again, as if mocking the night his rebellion drowned. Witnesses later said he repeated the same phrase over and over: "I have not deserved this." Perhaps he believed it. Perhaps he regretted everything. Or perhaps, in that final hour, he only wished he'd chosen a different king to back. At dawn, the executioner lifted his axe. Buckingham knelt, the wet ground soaking through his clothes. Soldiers tied in the circle. A priest whispered prayers into his ear. The Duke raised his head toward the gray sky, took one long breath, and laid his neck upon the block. The axe fell. The rebellion died with him. Richard III had won the battle but not the war. Buckingham's failed rebellion laid the groundwork for something far greater. 2 years later, Henry Tudor returned, not with storms against him but with an army at his back. At the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, Richard III was killed, and the Tudor dynasty began. Some said Richard's downfall began not at Bosworth but the moment the Duke of Buckingham turned against him, and Buckingham himself. His name remains a symbol of ambition, betrayal, and the dangerous game of choosing kings in a kingdom where crowns could shift with the wind. Thanks for watching.